Welcome to Deep Dive Film School. I'm Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see/hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people what?
Find good media. That's right. Our most active channels are TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. So please join us there.
Yes.
All right. Our fourth installment of Albert Brooks Festival 1991, Defending Your Life.
Yes.
Written and directed, of course, by Brooks, like all these movies. This is 1991. So, yeah, 6 years after Lost in America that we did a couple weeks ago. We got Albert Brooks, Meryl Streep, the great Rip Torn.
Oh, yeah.
Lee Grant and Buck Henry in this one. This was the only one that I had seen before in this festival. This is a PG movie, so it was something that I remember seeing on HBO when I was a kid or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And so there was a little nostalgia there. I knew the whole idea, but seeing it as an adult is a much different thing.
Yeah.
Watching this movie and wow, such a fucking brilliant movie.
I had never seen this, and I love this movie. I
knew you would.
I was so blown away by. Okay, this is a throwback, but if you remember, a billion years ago, you and I reviewed Wrist Cutters, A Love Story.
Yes.
And
I know where you're going with this now.
There were all these like peripheral pieces of the afterlife that they kind of explain little bits of and do as throwaway gags in Wrist Cutters that were way more interesting than the main relationship was in Wrist Cutters.
And you're like, I want to go to that
Yeah,
world.
I don't want to stay with these two emo kids. Like, they're bugging the crap out of me. I want to know about what's happening over there with this character. I want to know the rules, right? And I get it that was the point of that movie, but I just found that insufferable and annoying. Here, I mean, two things. One, if you're going to have a relationship and you want me to care about it, have 90s Meryl Streep, because holy Lord. That's first.
She looks great here. Yeah.
And she's so charming. Oh my God.
Oh yeah. No, we're going to get to it.
So there's that.
Yeah.
But then secondly, do a balance like this does, where it's all the pieces are connected, right? So that the lore of the afterlife, whatever limbo this is completely perfectly balanced with the love story that we're getting, that the stakes make sense to all pieces of it. Like, this thing, the writing here is tighter than a drum.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
We talked about
incredible.
the great lines in Lost in America, but ones here, oh my God.
Incredible.
Yeah,
and then just the premise, how the premise does what it does with the set design and the production design here. The little bits of special effects that we have make everything feel real, even though we're in limbo.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe I'd never seen this movie or even really heard of this movie before.
Well, honestly, it was the big reason why I wanted to do this festival, because I remembered this one from my childhood and loving it.
It's incredible. Because if I would have seen this as a kid, I would totally get what you're saying.
And so there's that. Again, surprised that it's PG, but it doesn't really need to be anything more than it is. But that's probably why it was a little more accessible to me at that time. But then I saw the Defending My Life documentary and wanted to see his other stuff as well. Thought it was a good opportunity for this festival, and it's been really interesting. But this one is by far my best, not only because I have some nostalgia with it, but also just like conceptually, again, out of this world.
Brilliant film.
Literally.
Yeah.
And they are in this limbo. They don't really bring religion into it almost ever. It's all... they call it the Judgment Center, right?
Yeah.
And Dr. Bob Diamond.
Yeah. And I love
doctor. I can't remember.
I don't know. But it's also like, you don't ever find out who these people are that are there. They're not really angels, but you also don't know if they were ever human.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily seem like it, but they talk about humans and they're like, yeah, we try to make this as comfortable for you as possible.
It's like The Good Place or whatever.
Yeah.
I
love it.
Two things that he did in Lost in America, he did here as well. He is an ad executive.
Yes,
again,
I noticed that. Yes.
and also he's in a brand new car from the BMW dealership.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So he dies in the car. He gets hit by a bus. That's how he gets.
Well, the
to
other
heaven.
car was a Mercedes, though, so I think that's the only difference is that one was the Mercedes
Yeah,
and this
that's the
one
only
is
difference.
a BMW.
But both of those things are the same. And
Total
it's kind of-
yuppie,
kind-
total
kind-
yuppie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, yeah, you mentioned this before.
Yeah, it's a total yuppie life that he lives for the like 2 minutes that he's alive,
But, like-
before he gets literally hit by a bus.
Yeah, and we honestly don't really know what he's like in that life. We see a little of it, and
We assume he's Albert Brooks.
some version of it's. If you've ever seen another Albert Brooks movie, that's who
You
he is.
assume he's Albert
Okay.
Brooks. Is he the creepy one from Modern Romance?
Yeah.
Is he the kind the more kind one from Lost in America? Yeah, you're not sure. But.
Anyways, but fascinating concept for a movie, and
Absolutely fascinating.
I'm so glad you loved it. I knew it was right down your alley.
Oh, yeah.
With what it's going with, and we still get his wit and his charm here. He's the most likable in this movie out of all of them. I think.
Agreed.
Like it doesn't really matter who he was in that life, and we do get to see that. I mean, that's part of the movie as we look back on these times in his life, which is a fascinating, and we'll get to that.
But his neuroses isn't the point here.
Yes. And also, he feels like he's kind of a different person in this place, especially after he meets Meryl Streep.
Well, I love the one of the great sort of
Judgment City.
One of the great vehicles for making this work, which I think is really interesting because, a lot of times, and we've talked about this when we reviewed What Dreams May Come, is that one of the challenges of making a movie that takes place in an afterlife is that the stakes aren't high anymore because, well, two things. One, the stakes aren't high anymore because your character's dead. And two, they're overloaded with the emotion of having died and being separated, that it gets in the way of any growth for those characters if you're in the afterlife. And this movie does this amazing thing. There's literally a point where I think it's Julie, I believe that's Meryl Streep's, Julia.
Mm-hmm, Julia.
Julia talks about, I know that I miss my kids and I'm sad that I don't get to see them, but actually I know that they're going to be okay too. And he goes, Bob Timon. He's like, Bob was saying that so that we can defend our lives more easily, is that we're not sad that we're missing that part, right? Like that's been stripped away from them so they can just focus on the work at hand.
Everyone seems happy.
Right. And so that's why people are like cool with just eating and these other things. So it's like, but I think it's such an interesting vehicle to be like, that's how we get around this otherwise inherent obstacle if you try and tell a story of the afterlife.
And there's also the yuppie type things that they're trying to relate to, right? Like, so this is kind of heaven, right? Like It's not quite heaven. They don't really say heaven. They say hell doesn't exist. I know that.
Yeah.
But essentially, like the food is the best food that you've ever eaten in your life. And physically,
you'll never have to worry about cholesterol or getting
eat
fat
whatever you want forever, all this stuff.
And I
love how much they focus on the food, though.
Oh my God. And that omelet looked really good.
But it was a constant kind of little joke throughout, and just everything. They're like, oh my God.
Yeah. It's so good. And
I've ever had.
The waiter's like, I'm going to get you 9 pies. He's like, please don't. He's like, you asked for these. He has them in those pie boxes. I loved, and it's an ongoing joke, and it never gets old, is how kitschy, like when he reads the menu at the very first place, it's like, praise God for these eggs. You know what I mean? It's like and I was like, that's perfect. Like the Albert Brooks afterlife is, of course, there would be billboards everywhere that would be using the word paradise, right? And there would be using the word like dream or something in the clouds, or like quoting Shakespeare, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, that's so what good. It would be. It would still be filtered through the
marketing
corny marketing that you're in heaven. And I loved that. I loved the the shuttles that everybody rides in. Again, like those little bits made it sort of science fiction-y in like not this overbearing way, but just this way where you're like,
it was very simplistic,
yeah,
right?
I buy this as the afterlife.
Absolutely. And there's obviously these heavy themes of reincarnation here, right? And like how many lives you have and
How smart you are.
how smart you
Little-
are.
little
you
brains.
Can, you can go to the past lives pavilion and go see like other
We'll
versions
get to
of
that.
yourself.
That's yeah.
But one of my favorite things, and again, another ongoing joke, which is just like funny as we're talking about it, is the percentage of brain that people use. So humans only use 3, maybe 5% of their brain.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of boasts and brags about how smart they are and how much brain power they have and all this stuff.
Well, and Rip Torn is,
but it's why it's like consistently still funny though, because everyone in the room is the smartest person in the room, and so everyone is very quippy and funny and charming.
Rip Torn keeps trying to describe it. He's like, I can't explain it to you, and he's like, well, you can try, and he's like, I was hung up in the other side of the whatever. He says some nonsensical sentence. And he's like, I don't understand. He's like, see? He's like, you're reading numbers? And he's like, yeah, one day you'll be able to also. Or he's eating, it's like, it looks like horse shit and it tastes like horse shit. And he's like, as you get smarter, your taste buds will get smarter too. He's like, all of that stuff I love so much. It's so interesting, this idea. And, you're right. There is this very... Hindu kind of concept of reincarnation, that it's like the smarter you get, and the more exalted your life has been, and the more you're removing fear from your life.
I was going to say there's themes inside of this judgment.
Yeah, it's like you become a more exalted being, and you're not going to just suddenly start using 60% of your brain, but that's sort of what happens over time. And that, Rip Torn, who's like Bob Diamond, if you do have to die and end up someplace, don't you hope there's a Bob Diamond? Even though he's going to be a little flippant and be like, oh, I couldn't show up the second day of your trial, but he's also like, don't worry about it. He's like, there are people who live hundreds of lives. Like, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you failed. And I just thought, like, what a nice kind of like even keeled
I think
sort
that's
of
why
concept,
it spoke to me as a kid, was because of that. But
it takes some fear away of like, okay, when I do die, I'll have a Bob Diamond that'll help me defend my life.
And fear means so much different things from when you were a kid to now, right?
Very much.
And what do they say? Little brains deal with fear. That's what little brains do.
Yeah.
Fear is the fog. That's why your stomach hurts.
Yeah.
Right? And my line that I could see using constantly is that he says is like, my 3% is swimming.
That's right. Now, the one thing that we do learn is that
it's not a trial, right?
It's not a trial. It's not a trial, even though he keeps calling it a trial.
And he keeps calling him a lawyer.
Yeah, his attorney. And the prosecutor. But we learn that they'll be pulling 9 days to review from random spots in his life.
Over the 4 days they'll be watching.
Over the 4 days is what it'll take for him to try and defend his life with Bob's help.
It's a judgment on his life. It's not necessarily defense, right? Like they try and make that, they try and make it clear. But he's like, I'm on trial for being afraid.
Yeah, and it's basically it is what it is. Really, is it's an evaluation of whether or not he's prepared
or not.
Well, and whether or not he's prepared to move on. Has he learned enough lessons to be able to move on to the next stage of life, right? And we don't really even know what that is. We don't know if that's heaven. We don't know. We just know that either he's going to go back to Earth and lead another life, or he gets to go on to whatever's next, that's past Judgment City. The moment, when he first gets there, he's borderline catatonic, can't really speak.
That's right.
No one on the shuttle
Everyone's
can
really
raise their hand,
Yeah.
right? Because who here loves golf? And they're all like, it's like, I know you can't raise your hand, but I saw some faces that look pretty excited. Goes all the way through it, right? The next morning, eats this amazing meal, or just one bite of this amazing meal.
They pull him away so fast.
And then he has to go meet Bob. One of the best moments in the movie happens really, really early here, which is when he gets back to his hotel and he gets off the shuttle and he walks inside. there's a new group that just got there that the concierge is talking to. And Brooks goes, like he's an old hand now because it's day 2 for him. And he's like, those newbies.
Heard this before.
I couldn't stop laughing at that idea that after one day in purgatory or wherever this is, you would immediately be like, those newbies. That is one of the funniest observations to me. But then he goes to a comedy stand-up thing.
The bomb shelter.
Yeah, the bomb shelter.
Which is amazing. I love that they push. They're like, hey, go have fun. Go.
Yeah.
You want to ride horses? We got horses.
Yep.
Really
in the time that
horses.
you're here, yeah. And he goes to the bomb shelter. Turns out using 50% of your brain does not mean that you're going to be very funny. And it results in not just him meeting Meryl Streep, but also in my opinion, one of the funniest lines in the movie.
Yes.
Which is she goes, let's get out of here. He's like, I can't. She's like, why? He's like, that's my dad. And she goes, really? And he's like, no, I'm kidding. But good. That is like, he has
right before that, he does he interacts with the comedian. Yeah. Like, how'd you die? He's like, on stage like you. So I gotta say, and it's the first time I really noticed it, and maybe it's because he's playing the most likable version of himself here. Mm-hmm.
Brooks has game. Like he is like I was watching this and I was like, granted you gotta like a really, really hairy guy, but if you do, I know women like guys who are funny, and I was like watching this, I was like, I get it now. Like I've seen in interviews like women talk about him being sexy, and I'm like, I can see it here because he's just so damn funny. It's like he's
charming. Yeah, he's always
so
on.
charming. But yeah, I really noticed it in this movie. I was like, those definitely seemed like I mean, don't get me wrong, she's an amazing actress. Those seemed like legit laughs coming from Meryl Streep.
For sure. And she kind of recognizes him. He's familiar to her for some reason. Maybe
we don't ever know why.
Yeah, we don't really know why. And if for some reason.
So did maybe they know each other in a prior life?
I mean,
I like that we don't ever really know.
Yeah, I think that's half the fun. We don't know, and maybe they do, maybe they don't, but maybe there's not a lot of young people there. It's a lot of old people,
or
right?
they really are soulmates, right? Because also, they both say that it's effortless.
For sure. And this comedian does this awful rendition of one of the greatest songs ever of Frank Sinatra's "That's Life."
That was live.
That was live. It was so bad, but so good at the same time.
And he's like, I'm glad we didn't leave.
But they go on a walk together after that. And like you said, like their chemistry, like he's got game. She's gorgeous. They're both just like you said, they're not worried, right? They're
and she's silly. She's funny. She's like always like pulling faces.
After she takes the stuff in adaptation funny,
Oh, yes.
Giggly,
totally.
kind of just charming, like laughing at everything. Yeah. His wit is great. Of course, we're laughing too. But it is bounding off the screen. And they're
she's
just
not
naturally flirtatious.
And he's, and meanwhile, he's worried. He is still like, what is this? 9 days of my life? People keep saying that's a lot. I don't know. And then you can tell she's not, right? Yeah. And she even says, obviously I'm jumping around, that she's like, I was always able to compartmentalize. I was always able to not be worried about what was going to happen. And then, he's realizing like, oh, she's like the best person I've ever met.
Yeah.
Right? Like she's a good person. And we get to see that later when he witnesses some of the memories from her life. When
he's like saving cats out of a burning building.
Just a legitimately capital G good person, which I think makes him feel even more like,
especially, comparing the two rooms for sure. She was a better person. But again, I feel like he also is turning into a version of her almost,
Well, and again, like we were saying earlier, he's not the kind of shitty neurotic version of himself.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say if there is one thing about this movie that really, really caught me off guard, just overall, having done this festival, is how much the cynicism that has been baked into everything else that Brooks has done is not here.
It's true.
This movie is so honestly, I was a little paranoid in watching this, I was like, please don't pull the rug out from underneath me. Like, please don't have her turn out to be shitty in the very last 5 minutes.
No,
like,
no reason.
please don't have coda on the screen that explains something terrible that happened. None of that's there. Like, this movie is hard on its sleeve, like, and which is such a funny thing to think about with this guy. It's like,
especially with an opportunity to talk about death in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Right? And he still does that.
yeah,
But
like the idea of what makes a person good.
Yeah.
Right. Like these ideas, these
a lot
big
deeper
ideas.
meaning here.
Well, it's funny because, you know, when we did real life, I kept comparing him to somebody like Tim Heidecker. And I think what's interesting is that this movie is like if you went and listened to Tim Heidecker's music, because his music is really good and super honest and is super hard on its sleeve, and it's never ironic, and it's very like kind of sentimental almost, right? And it takes people really by surprise, and they're like, wait, is he fucking with me? Like, and it's like, no, this is the one part of his life where he's not. It's like, that's what this movie is. It's like Albert Brooks was finally like, I want to talk about my idea of an afterlife and my idea of what it means to be a good human being.
That's exactly what we're doing.
And my idea of like not having fear and trying to be the best version of yourself. And like, that was the weirdest part is I was not expecting that at all.
And we haven't even gotten into some of these episodes that
Oh my God,
Let's
yeah.
get into some of these. So this is a very Brooks thing to do, I thought. You know, it did give me Purple Rose of Cairo vibes a little bit, right? But
that's a good comparison, yeah.
But you know, basically, yeah, there's two not judges or whatever. They don't even really say what they're called, but everyone's super friendly. We get the dragon lady, right? Or dragon slayer, or something. I think it's Lena is her name in the movie. And she's the woman who's kind of the defense attorney, I guess it would be.
Prosecutor.
To Rip Torn. And so they each make their arguments and pick out different points of their life. And because they're so smart, they know everything about him and have seen every part of his life already, and they pick out these moments to try and prove whether or not. And it's really interesting how they choose these. It's mostly chronological.
And I think that these first two that we get
pretty intense,
are such a tonal shift, again, from anything that we've seen from Albert Brooks to this point, where the first one is, and the first one's a little bit more like, oh, schoolyard bully, like kind of a thing.
This
and
before,
But then the second one, when they start talking about this concept of restraint, of not being violent, and him as a baby, almost like seeing
his parents
like physically fighting, like his dad physically hit his mom,
but he stops them. It's a great shot.
I was like, and that baby is an incredible actor. It like made me so sad. Like I was like, oh, whoa, like it really is though. It's a tonal whiplash.
Yeah, big time.
Because you're like, oh, it's Albert Brooks, but we're in limbo, right? And you're like, okay, what's gonna happen? And the food's so good, and Rip Torn's here, and then all of a sudden there's this
and the
like,
dad's drunk, obviously.
Yeah, there's like suddenly this fucking like real kind of dramatic moment, and I was like, I was like, oh my God,
and
you know, like.
No, absolutely tonal shift. And the fact that he stops and looks at them and he stops them from doing it and they hug. And you're like, holy fuck, that's intense.
Super intense.
Big time. Yeah, wow. And then
and that parlays this whole conversation around fear.
Yeah. And
right?
So that's really what they end up coming back to. He thinks sometimes it's really money or it's pettiness or something like that. They're like, no, why did you back down from
why'd you cave?
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just fear. I mean, you know, and this gets very much into Act 3, but it's like as we learn, as he sees more things, is that it's a fear. It's a fear that he doesn't deserve good things.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting because, you know, the very first thing we see him do in the movie right before he dies is actually like get the car he always wanted, right? And he's really happy. He's really it's his birthday and he's really happy. And there's like an interesting manipulation happening here because he's played this kind of yuppie character before and is shallow and always assumes that he deserves the best things in the world, which is why he throws the most classic Albert Brooks temper tantrums, right?
Yeah.
And here we assume that's the same guy. And we only meet him for a minute before he gets pancaked by a bus, right? So then as we start to like unpack this over time and talk about fear, we realize this is a different Albert Brooks.
Yeah.
He finally did something nice for himself and bought that nice car for himself, but he's had a horrible divorce, right? And he's had only $9,000 to his name. Like he's a very different character actually. And what his fear is based around is a fear that people are going to be like, no, not you. You don't get this nice thing. Right. And that's turns into what the highest stakes are for him and Julia, is that he believes she is too good for him. Yeah. Right. Which is why he doesn't want to ruin it by consummating their relationship. Like he's terrified because he's like, she's too good for me. Of course she's going to leave. And of course I'm going to get sent back. Like he's pretty sure early on that he's not going to make it. Right. And so why would he deserve her? Which is like so different than any other Albert Brooks character we've seen.
But, you know, she leaves him a message and she's like, I miss you. Isn't that funny? You know, like just cute little messages.
So cool.
But yeah, we do see kind of the other side too. He goes to the sushi bar, which is really funny. Take a piss.
All the guys, take a piss. Yeah.
But he meets this guy, Frank, is it? He was like a pimp or something based.
He's like, look, nobody ever said all. It sounds like a Trump tangent. No one ever said all nude. I'm the first one that said all nude. Before that, they just said nude. I'm the guy that invented it. I was like,
yeah, that's funny.
That's weird.
But yeah, so it's this kind of creepy guy, and he's had 100-something days. I don't remember, but like,
you're like, he's been here.
I think they know
a really long time.
Yeah. But you kind of see the other side of it, where like he's kind of stuck in the middle. He's not as bad as this guy, right?
But he also isn't staying at a hotel. He's not staying at the hotel that she's staying at.
That's the other thing I was going to mention, is that she has a nicer hotel because she was a better person. This is like somebody
playing a harp in like the front in like the lobby.
Yeah,
yeah, that's amazing. I loved all of that. Again, I think the endless spaghetti noodle at the restaurant again, like so funny.
I love the episode where he didn't believe in Casio. Like he didn't want to invest in Casio.
Yeah.
That this guy was like saying they're going to be the next big thing. He's like, he just kind of pushes it off, and he could have been a millionaire basically, because he had that $10,000 or whatever he was going to do with it. But in the judgment, he's like, "Who knew the universe revolves around money?" And he's like, they're like, "No, it's not. It's not the money."
Yeah, but he keeps focusing back on that, and he's taking it really personally, right? Yeah. He's like, "Really, I'm in heaven, and you guys are like stuck on the minutia of how much money I made." And they're like, "It's not about that. It's about the chances that you didn't take because you didn't believe in yourself." Yeah, I think that all of those aspects, Brooks talked about this idea that like he wanted to be honestly sentimental because I think that he didn't straight up say it this way, but I think he started feeling like he was kind of part of the problem, right? That the yuppie culture that he was kind of a part of was so materialistic and was so eye rolling about any kind of like authentic sentimentality. Mm-hmm. And so in his early version of his script, his character doesn't make it and actually comes back as a horse, which again would feel like one of his other movies, right?
Well, when they go to the Past Lives Pavilion, we do see a variety of things there.
That is true.
A sumo wrestler, the's a Prince Valiant.
And he's like, what were you? And he was like, dinner.
He's like, food. Yeah. A whaler, a tailor.
Yeah.
All these different things.
What a great, again, you talk about just touching on an idea for a second. Right? Yeah. That feels
futuristic.
Well, it feels like a Charlie Kaufman kind of a thing, right? That there would be a museum you could go to see all of your past lives, and they just do it as like a date night. Yeah. But again, this is a rom-com in so many ways of them, and the movie does such a perfect balance of the two, of being able to be a rom-com, and to your point, like their chemistry is completely off the charts, and then at the exact same time, all of that informs this larger idea about being a good person, about taking chances, taking risks, about, like self-actualizing, like believing in yourself. You know, it's like it manages this really delicate dance to do all of that, and you're like, and we're in the afterlife. Like,
And there's this charming little side story too that adds a lot to what's happening here.
completely.
Yeah, and then we get into he goes he's about to present to a big crowd and just wants not want to have anything to do with it. He gets stage fright.
It's such a sad moment.
It is a sad moment, and he gets up there and he's about to say something maybe, and
Or
then
pass out.
and then there's a gas leak and he gets bailed out. And
Yeah.
she shows that as an example of him not doing that, and then Rip Torn turns it around and says, I actually think it's brave that he went out there and he was going to do it. So there's all these arguments and judgments of like what's
splitting hairs of
It's
like
very
what
splitting
yeah
hairs,
well
yeah.
just like him taking the punishment as a little boy for his friend not having the art supplies,
that too, yeah.
and then immediately throwing him under the bus when he got home. And I was like, that's such a human thing though. That's
Sure,
what
yeah.
we all do.
It's true.
We do a noble thing and then we immediately go back on it because we're scared, like that's what people do.
But then you see him crash in Big Bear and drag himself 3 miles with 2 broken bones in his leg, right?
Yeah.
And so they use that as an example, and that's nothing that we've ever seen in any kind of that's like fucking crazy shit right there. Like,
yeah.
life and death shit. Like like that. That's a good example of what they're talking about.
Although
So,
she says
have
like
we ever
that's
seen Albert Brooks'
perseverance.
character do that?
No, well, and she says that's perseverance though. Like fear of death is not the same as fear of failure, right? That like fear of death, fear of a bear attacking you, fear of wolves is like, it almost seems like that's the fear that it doesn't matter if you're little brain or big brain, that you'll always kind of have. And so they're like, that's not the fear that we're arguing. We're arguing about like fear that you're not good enough, like fear that you're inadequate.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what happens in the restaurant when she's eating the noodles, right?
Yep.
Because the Dragon Slayer is watching. She's observing.
Yep. And what does she say? She goes, I'm going to go to the bathroom. And when I come back, I hope you've figured all this out. Which again, just gives you an idea of like how much further along on the journey that she is than he is.
For
right?
sure. But, he's kind of afraid of her spying too much or seeing some vulnerability.
Yeah.
He still has that anxiety, which is why, I think partially why he ends up, like you mentioned before, why he ends up breaking it off with her, not consummating what he really wants to do.
In part because he says, what if it's bad?
Yeah.
Like sleeping with her. Like, what if it's not? Like, I'd rather, and like, this kind of broke my heart when he said this. He goes, I'd rather always wonder what it would be like than to experience and have it be not as great as what I was hoping.
Yeah,
for.
better than this than nothing, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what she says.
And you're just like, wow, what a, and I don't know, look, I don't want to psychoanalyze here, but I will say like that might be an autobiographical statement, knowing how smart Albert Brooks is and how much he loves to deconstruct things and be like,
his real name is Albert Einstein.
You're completely right. You're completely right. And you think about it, it's like a person like that is more likely to be like, oh, these are just chemicals in my brain that make me love you. Not that I'm actually, you know what I mean? Like he's definitely one of those people. So for him to be like, I don't want to do it in case it's not as good as what I
Having
imagine.
most of that fear stripped away, though, when he's in this place helps, though. It helps him, opens his eyes a little bit, right?
Very much so.
Which is why I think he is a little bit of a different person, but they seem to have like true feelings for each other. It's really sweet.
Yeah.
They say it's effortless, which is like such a beautiful way to put it. And so, he's so under the microscope, right?
Well, and when we finally get to it, I didn't know. I mean, the ending to this movie is I think it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I did not think that in the final arguments for defending his life that she was going to show the clip from the night before.
Yeah.
And I love that Rip Torn's like, we're still doing that? I didn't think we could do that anymore. Like, I thought we didn't show stuff from here,
Breaking
right?
the rules.
You're breaking the rules. And she makes such a good point where, and he fucking Rip Torn tries to twist it into this thing about STDs, and he's like, yeah, they do. They say if you're having sex with a person, you have sex with all the people that they've had sex with. And he goes, and now that I've been to the past lives exhibit, that's like thousands and thousands of people, and you're kind of like, you're faking it, like you know that you were afraid, and you were afraid because you don't think you're a good enough person. And the twist of pulling that into it, and then the final sacrifice that he makes, was just like, I had no idea what the dismount was going to be for this thing, but damn.
Yeah, it gives you a little closure. Like, part of me, it's nice because it is a rom-com to have that, but like part of me is wondering, like, what if they just went their different ways and that was it too? So like, you need the payoff, but the fact that the final judgment of them watching him try and get to her,
that's the thing.
That's
the thing. Them ending up together, great. If they didn't, hey man, Lost in Translation's an amazing movie. Not everybody needs to end up together.
Sure, yeah.
It's that leap of faith that he took was the thing. That was what he needed.
Yeah.
Right? That's what self-actualized him, as he finally fought for something he wanted. And like, yeah, I was just like, I was already so sold on it.
But by that, electrocuted.
yeah. But by that last moment, I was just so I had fallen most of the way in love. Well, he doesn't get in, right?
Like he did that. I mean, that we kind of skipped over, but the judgment came in and he didn't make it back. But this puts him over the edge.
Yep. Because he finally was like, I don't want to lose this person. Yeah. And I love that we don't. The victory is vague because we don't know where the next place is, but just that they're going together.
Yeah.
It's so sweet.
It's brilliant to be able to talk about this without really roping religion or beliefs like that into it. It's really more about, are you a good person?
Yeah. Like looking back on all of your experiences and your memories, what is that? What did you learn? Mm-hmm. What did you come away with? And I was so impressed, man.
Yeah,
it was just.
I'm
so
glad you liked
movie.
it as much as you did.
I loved it.
I knew it would be down your level, but I'm so glad you. It seems like a game changer.
Oh man,
so
it's going on a list.
Yeah, awesome.
It's so damn good.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching. Please follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube if you like this journey. And we're gonna do that one scene from Eyes Wide Shut next week. So rally up for that one. It's a good one, I'm sure. So soon to be recorded.
Yep.
But thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, you guys.